Hello and welcome to AgPhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about a nutrient today that we've gotten so many questions on over the last year that we just couldn't let this one go. We're going to talk about boron and how you can best use it to build your yields.
We're also going to talk about how you can solve next spring's crusting problems on your farm. If you've had any crusting issues, we want to talk about some of the steps to alleviate that problem going into this coming year.
Well, I've never liked crust, Brian, and I've never liked our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
You spend all year working hard to get as much yield as possible at harvest. The last thing you want to do is put your grain in the bin and have it spoil before you take it to market. Introducing the Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG. Designed and built by a farmer looking for a low-cost monitoring solution for existing bins, the Grain Temp Guard tracks temperature and humidity with an alarm system to alert you when your grain exceeds safe thresholds. For more information on a system for your bins, visit farmshopmfg.com.
One of the questions Darren and I pretty commonly get from non-farmers is, why do some farmers harvest grain as opposed to harvesting silage? What's really the difference between those two things?
The other side of that too is, as a farmer, what do you have to do to prepare for silage versus grain corn? And after you harvest silage versus grain corn, what do you have to do to that ground afterwards? When we look at feeding livestock, that's a big job of cornfields in the United States. We're harvesting number 2 yellow corn, not to put on your plate as sweet corn. It's a whole different crop than that. We're putting it out there for animal feed and for ethanol production. When we're harvesting it as silage, it's exclusively going for feed.
Okay, just to clarify this too, because Darren said with the grain, it's ethanol and some for feed. Just understand, all grain that goes to ethanol is also going to feed. All they pull out of that grain when they are making ethanol is the starch. That's it. So all the nutrients continue to go to livestock just like they always have. So anyway, the big difference that I guess I would talk about is just with silage, you're taking the whole plant. So you're mixing up all the leaves, the stalk, everything else together with the grain. With grain, obviously, all you're taking is physically the grain. And we used to, as farmers, harvest the whole ear, and then you'd have to take the grain off the ear, and then you'd have all these cobs left. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore. Modern combines now go through the field, and they shell that corn right in the field, so all you're left with is the grain, and everything else remains in the field when you're harvesting grain corn.
So clearly, there becomes a management decision for farmers of, wow, if I've got all this residue from the leaves and stalk and everything laying in my field, I've got to get that out of the way in order to plant my seed there next year. So a lot of farmers in that case may do some tillage to chop up those stalks and mix them into the soil, where a farmer that has harvested silage, well, if everything's gone except for the root mass and maybe a foot left of stalks, there's not much out in the field, so chances are that farmer doesn't need to do a whole lot of tillage.
In terms of storing the grain versus the silage, they are two different things as well. When people are harvesting silage, then they're cutting it much earlier in the season. The grain is actually still pretty wet. That silage has a lot of moisture to it. And then, in effect, there is some fermentation process that even goes on in the silage pile. It's whole different when farmers are talking about grain. They want to harvest the grain pretty dry. They even dry the grain down a little bit more and store the grain in bins at roughly 13 to 15% moisture. So very dry compared to that wet silage.
So when you drive by fields and you see a lot of the corn crop residue still out in the field, the farmer harvested the kernels of corn out of that field, versus when you see no stalks left other than maybe a foot-tall stub and a pretty clean field, you know that field was harvested for silage.
Well, either way, whether that corn is going for grain or the farmer's taking everything for silage, he's got to worry about weed control. We'll talk about controlling our weed of the week coming up later in the show.
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, You're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Increase your productivity with Hypro's dual react control system. The dual nozzle body design allows you to drive at the speed you want while maintaining the rate and droplet size you need. Hypro, helping you spray better.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
One of the micronutrients that is incredibly important for all grain production is boron. We're going to talk today about boron, what it specifically does in plants, and what kind of levels you should be looking for on your farm.
Well, boron is a pretty interesting nutrient, and one of the things that I think is really important to understand before we start this discussion is that boron is leachable in soils. So much like nitrogen and sulfur, it can move down through soils with excessive rainfall, and even more so when you have lighter soils and low organic matter levels. So it's really important as you start thinking about, all right, I get it, boron's a nutrient my crops need. When you think about how you're going to apply it and when you're going to apply it, you'll have to time it out so it's available for the crop. So think of boron as a building block. Once it's in that plant, it really doesn't move around much. It's not going to translocate in the plant like a nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium will. So we have to apply that boron when our crop is going to need it. So if we need some early in the year, which we do, we're going to need a little bit out there early. But if you need some late for pollination, for test weight, for filling that ear of corn out to the tip, you're going to have to apply some boron later in the season as well.
Well, maybe. That's hard to say. If you've got light ground and you have lots of moisture, then yes, you definitely need to apply some later on in the year. But if you have heavy soil and you just get your soil levels up, you're in good shape. Well, anyway, before we get to that and what you should have in your soil, we got to talk a little more about why boron is so important. It can actually help move food, sugars, hormones in throughout the plant. It's important for cell structure. If you do have corn ears, for example, they don't quite fill out to the end, very commonly that can be a shortage of boron. Boron is tremendously important in flowering for all crops. So there are a lot of reasons why you've got to have good boron levels in your plant. So Darren made the comment about applying it at all these different times of the year, and you certainly can do that. But I kind of look at, on our farm, for example, we've got some really heavy ground, don't normally have a lot of rainfall. I'm not super worried about boron leaching on our farm. What I'm more worried about is how much do I have in my soil? Because I would just ask you this, how much boron have you applied on your farm in the last 20 years? On our farm, it hadn't been much. So the last few years, we've been putting out some dry boron, a pound or 2 or even 3 pounds on a per acre basis broadcast. So we have some boron, we get those levels up. Now we're seeing boron in the plants later in the season.
What gets people nervous though, Brad, when you talk about a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds of boron, is boron toxicity. We've all heard about it, we've read about it, that I'm nervous about that, so I'm just gonna run a pint, or I'm just gonna run a quart. And you know what, if you're nervous about it, here's what you need to do. Try out some different rates on your farm. Maybe you're putting out a quart and you think, you know, a quart I'm pretty comfortable with, but maybe on one pass, you say, all right, I'm gonna try 2 quarts, or I'm gonna try 3 quarts, and you go from there. Or if you're putting out some dry boron and you say, well, my fertilizer dealer says everybody's using a pound and they're comfortable with that. Well, that's fine, use the pound. But then maybe you try 2 pounds just on one pass through the field and see what happens. And once you learn, well, hey, here's what happened when I put on those higher rates. Here's what happened in my plant tissue test. Here's what happened on my soil test. Now you've got some good information for your farm going forward.
Now, one of the biggest problems that we commonly see when we talk about fertility rates with farmers is, are we talking about a pound of actual or a pound of whatever that material is? So Darren mentioned a pint or a quart. Well, what does that really mean? Okay, so if you've got 10% liquid boron, for example, obviously it's 10% active. Well, if you're putting a quart on, how much does a quart weigh? Weighs roughly 3 pounds at the most. Okay, so 10% of 3 pounds is 0.3 pounds. Well, literally, if you had a fantastic corn crop, it could use 0.3 pounds this year. So you've got to have that every single time you raise corn, plus your soybeans would need something. So I'm just trying to say, make sure that you look at what is your actual removal. Our suggestion is download the free AgPhD fertilizer removal app and just look up your crop, your yield, and then you can see how much boron you actually need each and every year.
When we talk about boron, I mentioned before, soil testing and plant tissue analysis. These are really 2 good pieces to be able to see what nutrients are in your soil and what nutrients are actually getting into your crop. When we look at those soil test levels with boron, most of the tests that I've looked at over the last few years, really across North America, and even some tests internationally, have been down in the 0.4 parts per million to 0.6 parts per million of boron. So about a half a part per million. That's not enough. We really want to see a minimum of 1.2 parts per million on a soil test, but we'd really rather see 3 parts per million. And on our farm, we're even pushing those limits a little bit to see if a little bit more boron could be even more beneficial for us. Now, that said, this is not the most important nutrient on your farm. If you're short of N, P, and K, well, you're not going to notice if you're just a little bit short of boron, because the N, P, and K are going to take precedence. So I'm assuming that you've got those in order before you're really concerned about super high levels of boron.
Even if you don't have your N, P, and K where you want, we still encourage you test your soil for boron and be thinking about applying at least a little bit of boron almost every year, because boron is leachable.
Well, getting more boron out there could make your crop a little healthier. Another thing that could benefit your crop would be controlling our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
You spend all year working hard to get as much yield as possible at harvest. The last thing you want to do is put your grain in the bin and have it spoil before you take it to market. Introducing the Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG. Designed and built by a farmer looking for a low-cost monitoring solution for existing bins, the Grain Temp Guard tracks temperature and humidity with an alarm system to alert you when your grain exceeds safe thresholds. For more information on a system for your bins, visit farmshopmfg.com.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/AgPhD.
What's the most complex industry on Earth? It isn't big data or commodities, not genetics or meteorology or even logistics. It's a business that involves them all. It's farming. And we're proud to work with generations of American farmers in the most complex and rewarding industry on Earth.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whenever you want. In your life and on your farm, Case IH AFS Connect gives you more control. Monitor your operation, manage your fleet and your farm data your way. Case IH. Rethink productivity.
It starts with genetics, what you're made of. It takes agronomy. It's local. It's knowing your land and having the tools to put the right product in the right place. It's built on service with trust, grit, and determination. Because it turns out, what it takes to make the best product is a lot like what it takes to make a farmer. Golden Harvest, rooted in genetics, agronomy, and service.
If you've ever had a soil crusting issue on your farm, preventing your plants from getting out of the ground, you know that that can be a real problem and a real hindrance to top yield. So today we want to talk about how to reduce surface crusting issues for next spring.
2019 was quite a year to learn about many different things out in the field, and one of them was what a big issue crusting could be. We saw several common scenarios where crusting was really occurring, and that's what we wanted to talk about today because the time to fix these is in the fall. When we look at tillage, let's talk about tillage first of all. My dad grew up in north central Iowa, and his practice on the farm that he grew up in was, well, we're gonna till this soil, then we're gonna till it again, and then we're gonna till it again, so it's absolutely perfect. And it really honestly looked like pulverized powder out in the fields. It was so fine you couldn't hardly see a corn stalk, and it was beautiful to plant in. The problem was we had wind erosion issues and we had crusting. When you pound those soil particles down to just really fine soil, you end up with more chance of having crusting out in the soil. So for me, I see a big benefit with leaving some level of residue in the field, at least for avoiding crusting, because one of the things that you may not think about too is just the impact of rainfall. When rain is just going to hit soil directly, it's going to pack a lot on that top surface and you're going to see some crusting.
The next thing we look at is calcium levels in that soil. If you have a good calcium level, and by that I'm talking about 65 to 75% calcium or so on the base saturation test, well, now you're in much better shape to reduce that crusting overall. We see a lot more crusting in high magnesium soils, and the reason why is because magnesium is such a small particle. When you have great big particles, basically calcium, then they don't bind together as much, they don't compact as easily. So get your calcium levels higher, and generally speaking, your crusting issues will go down.
This is one of the reasons we're talking about this fall, because it often comes down to a fall application of a couple different products. Gypsum would be one that we get a lot of questions about in terms of reducing crusting. Gypsum can really work by improving that calcium level and by just spreading it on top of the surface of your soil. It's going to work its way down through that soil with moisture over time. So if you're in no-till, get it done soon. If you're in a conventional till situation, can you till it in? Yes, but it's a product that could also be left on the soil surface. When it comes to lime, fall application is the best as well. And again, when we're putting calcium out there with the purpose of reducing crusting, surface applications are the best.
All right, one of the most important things here too is just when are you going to be out in the field? As much as possible, we want to try to stay off that ground when it's too wet. Well, how do you reduce the ground being too wet? In a lot of cases, you just have to add some drain tile. If you have tile out there, you're much less likely to have surface crusting because you're much less likely to have an overabundance of moisture out there. But again, like we said earlier, you really need to take a look at that calcium and adding some more residue or leaving some more residue out in that field. So those are probably the three biggest things that I look at. The big watch out, other than just going out there when things are too wet, is rolling. I'm not a real big fan of rolling soil because usually we see more surface crusting if that ground is rolled.
Well, the challenge with any of these farming practices, Brian, like rolling, for example, is there are benefits. If you've got rocks out there, I see why guys want to do it. They want to push those rocks down so they can run their combine head a little bit lower. I get it. I understand that. And there's other benefits as well. So if you're going to be doing the rolling, you probably want to wait till after emergence, which again, carries its own risks too. If you've got crop that's up, trying not to break too much of the crop off.
Yeah, or again, if you are going to roll, you say, look, I'm absolutely rolling. I try to leave as much residue out as possible, have real high calcium levels, and then that's going to reduce the issues and the likelihood you're going to have crusting after rolling.
Well, all those stresses, as you can see, can add up. If you've got all of those problems, crusting becomes much more likely. So deal with the ones you can. If there's some that you just can't entirely deal with, then make sure you have all those other bases covered. Same would be true with controlling weeds. This is one that you definitely want to get under control on your farm. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our Weed of the Week is a tough winter annual. It's Shepherd's Purse.
We get a lot of questions about this one and a lot of misidentification early each spring. We see a lot of field pennycrests out there and other weeds that farmers will say, well, isn't this Shepherd's Purse? Well, no, it's not. And I get it, Shepherd's Purse, much easier to identify when it gets a little bigger. It's a member of the mustard family, so keep that in mind when you look at the early leaves and the rosette stage of Shepherd's Purse.
All right, I got to tell you a quick story from the early days of AgPhD. We did this as a weed probably 20 years ago, and we had a cameraman who couldn't stop laughing when we said the other name of Shepherd's Purse is Clappity Pouch, and so it took us probably an hour just to film our little Weed of the Week segment because this guy couldn't stop laughing whenever he heard Clappity Pouch.
Yeah, that was really tough, so we won't even get into that discussion a little bit. Let's just talk about how to wipe out this weed in your farm, because it's fine to look at on TV. You don't want to see it out in the field because it's a winter annual weed. It gets a start in the fall, and then by springtime, it's got a big root system underneath it. And I think too many people are fooled by, well, I only see this plant and it's a couple inches tall out there. Dig up the root system, and when you do, take your shovel and go about 12 inches down before you turn the soil over, then look at the root system. It's huge by spring. And when you've got that great big root system, a tiny little rate of Roundup post-emerge is not going to wipe this weed out. It's going to take a full quart in the spring.
Right, so what you can do is spray this in the fall. 2,4-D, dicamba, heck, even Valor will work great. So get something out there in the fall, and usually you don't have a big problem with Shepherd's Purse come spring.
All right, now let's talk about spring control. You could be doing spring tillage, and in many cases, farmers will say, well, I haven't seen this one for a couple years, and I say, tell me about your tillage program. Well, I do my tillage in the spring. Great. If you're doing spring tillage, you can wipe out Shepherd's Purse. That's nice. But if you already did your tillage last fall and you still see the Shepherd's Purse out there now, you have to deal with it with herbicides.
All right, so real quick, I would prefer to see you run with like Verdict in the spring, maybe Sure Start or Triple Flex. Balance Flex has some activity too, but just the regular grass killers, Harness or Pass, Outlook Dual, they aren't gonna cut it. But post-emerge, you've got even better choices. Status is the best, throw a little atrazine with it, and it's even better.
All right, when we get to soybeans, I like to start with our 3-pre program, and we've got pretty good activity really out of all three components there, either Valor or Authority, plus one of the yellows like Treflan or Prowl, plus some Metribuzin. All of them have got activity on Shepherd's Purse. Together, they're lights out.
Yep, and follow up post-emerge with Roundup. Make sure you use a good strong rate. If it's a Roundup Ready bean, Liberty works, dicamba works, 2,4-D works. It all depends on your trait you're gonna use. Then turning to wheat, I'd say start with Sharpen and follow up with Husky post-emerge.
Well, that's all the time we have for our Weed of the Week, Shepherd's Purse, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
I need results, so I choose the one system I trust to take weeds down and keep them down on even my toughest acres with the kind of yield potential that helps keep me in the black. To deliver my kind of results, season after season. I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system. I choose results.
It's been remarkable what we've seen out of the varieties of Extend soybeans. The yield has come through for us.
We had the best soybean crop we've ever had. The yields were there.
With the Roundup Ready Extend crop system, the yield boost and the lack of weed pressure really helps our bottom line.
The technology has exceeded my expectations. It's one thing that the industry has been looking for years.
There's nothing like harvesting record crops.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgReliquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgReliquid moves you closer to your target.
You work hard and invest a lot of time and money to make your crop each year. Don't let that effort go to waste. Moisture loss from over-drying stored grain can cost you thousands for each percentage point lost. Get the Grain Temp Guard Alarm HT from Farm Shop MFG. The Alarm HT uses temperature and humidity sensors to alert you when conditions in your bin put your crop at risk. Don't shrink your profits. Learn more about this low-cost solution at farmshopmfg.com.
I need results. So I choose the one system I trust to take weeds down and keep them down on even my toughest acres with the kind of yield potential that helps keep me in the black to deliver my kind of results season after season. I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system. I choose results.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whenever you want. In your life and on your farm, Case IH AFS Connect gives you more control. Monitor your operation, manage your fleet and your farm data your way. Case IH. Rethink productivity.
One of the cheapest pieces of equipment could be the most valuable thing you buy this year. I'll explain in today's Iron Talk. A good stainless steel probe is about a $100 investment. To operate it, I'd suggest making a mark at the depth that you'd like to pull your soil samples from so you're always accurate. In this case, we made a mark at 6 inches for the most common tests we run on our farm. We set up the AgPhD Soils app to help you build your own grid soil maps. Whether you use the app or just find your own spots in the field to take your sample, it only takes about a quart of soil in a sample bag. We recommend pulling 8 to 10 cores per sample in a specific area and bagging each area separately rather than mixing multiple areas across the field together. Make sure that your probe is straight up and down as you pull each sample. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. A good soil sampling program on our farm guides the hundreds of thousands of dollars we invest in fertility each year. Taking our own samples gives us confidence that we have good data to work from. Now, judging by our yield increases that we've been able to make and the purity of the water coming out of our tile lines, the return on investment from a $100 soil probe has been very good for us. I'm confident it will be for you as well. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we'd encourage you to check out the AgPhD radio show. You'll find us on SiriusXM channel 147 each weekday at 2 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next AgPhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching AgPhD.